Hello, everyone. It's Charlene Lee, and today I'm going to be talking about resilience. And so I welcome you. I'm starting a little bit late today, but I want to welcome everyone. And if you can, share where you're coming from, but also share an example of how you prepare for disruption, how you are building resilience for yourself, but also very importantly for your organization. I'm very curious because resilience is in many ways, I think, the thing that really defined whether people did well, not just survived, but thrived during the past 2 years as COVID was hitting. So we all know we all went through a huge amount of change and disruption, but the resilience that we have as individuals, as leaders, and also the resilience that we have as an organization really determine how we came into and during COVID, how we behaved, how we dealt with things. But also, whenever there's disruption, there's also opportunities. And so resilience also looks into the adaptability of an organization to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that happen with disruption. So resilience is a fascinating area, and I've always wanted to dig deeper into that. And that's what I want to talk about today. So a couple things. What is resilience? And so when I look at defining this, let's look at it from a personal point of view. Resilience is the ability to withstand adversity and to bounce back from difficult events. Now, that's the traditional definition of resilience, especially from a personal perspective. You know, things come your way and you can deal with it. You have the capacity to be able to have that flexibility and be able to deal with things and to bounce back. So setback after setback, obstacles that come your way, you have that resilience to do that. It does not mean you're not feeling stressed, that there is no emotional upheaval, that there's no suffering. That's not what resilience is. It's that despite that, you can keep going and you bounce back. So organizational resilience is the ability to, again, anticipate that these setbacks are going to happen, that these disruptions are going to happen, and that you prepare and you respond, and then you adapt to the circumstances. And that you can both deal with some incremental changes that you need to make along the way, but also these big, sudden, we call them the black swan events that come your way. And the thing is, you know they're coming. And so you prepare as an organization, as a team, as leadership, as a culture to be able to deal with this. So what I'd like to talk about today is how do we think about resilience as something not that you build into your organization to just survive, but how it becomes a competitive advantage because you have done this better than everybody else. And more importantly, that you know you have this confidence that you can push into these disruptions and be able to come out ahead, even though you have no idea how things are going to work out. And that's confidence is the key thing that I'm talking about. So let me go into just a little deeper about COVID and how COVID really taught us a lot about things. I came across some great data from Deloitte that before 2020, 24% of CXOs, so executives in the C-suite, completely regarded themselves as ready to deal with any potential disruptions. And 21%, almost the same amount, were completely confident that their organizations could quickly adapt and pivot. After that, in 2021, so this is after having been in COVID for a year and a half, that number had increased from 24% who felt that they were ready to lead through any of these potential disruptions to 34%. So from 24% to 34%. And the level of confidence that the organization could adapt went from 21% to 30%. This represents a huge confidence boost in terms of leaders' confidence in themselves and their organizations to be able to weather any storms because we just did it. We just did it through COVID. And we came out the other side, not only okay, but thriving. So this does mean, though, that the vast majority of leaders are not confident. So we have a lot of work to do. I don't know about you, but one of the things we're doing is now thinking about how do we deal with a potential recession, especially with so much inflation going on, so much turmoil and uncertainty. It really feels like this growth that we've been seeing is going to start slowing down, and potentially we could be thrown back into a recession. So how do we prepare for that? And also, how do we think about things differently? So one of the, I just want to see here. Hello, Ricardo. Thank you so much for joining today. And we have this great comment from Nick. How do they prep? They forecast and scenario plan. So you know what is likely to come and what might happen that could be catastrophic. But don't ignore the white elephants as well as black swans. Great point. The white elephants are the opportunities that you can see also. And seek out diversity of thought when you do all of this. We're going to come back to this, Nick, because I think so many people do the preparation, but do we actually do the scenario planning and, very importantly, the testing, the wargaming to see, can we actually perform? If there's we do fire drills, right? In a case of emergency, do we know where the closest exit is? Similarly, do we have confidence that when that situation hits us, are we going to be prepared? So we're going to come back to that in just a second. I do want to talk about this difference in mindset between thinking about resilience as creating, being reactive and creating a buffer to these big events that could come. And the investment you want to make to hardening the organization, preparing so that the organization doesn't completely fall apart and you can survive. So that buffer is there because we anticipate any shocks, and it just gives us enough breathing room to be able to get ready to respond and to be able to move forward. We just want a little bit of space so that the organization can learn and adapt. That's very different than having the adaptive capacity. Again, similar thing, we have this adaptive capacity, but it's actually giving you the capacity to anticipate and know that change is going to happen. And that more importantly than just surviving, you're really going to take advantage of the change and be able to adapt faster and better than anyone else in the market. And by doing that, you not only just survive, but you also take advantage of all the opportunities that disruption is putting forward to you. I like to say that when COVID hit, for example, work didn't go away, needs didn't go away, but they shifted. And my favorite example are restaurants who had no more in the restaurant dining anymore because we all had to shut down, really quickly pivoted and created new menus that were better for takeouts and did so many different things. And they were adaptable. They really started thinking about their business and their customers in new and different ways. So, that's the key thing that I want to talk about today is how do we think about moving from resilience as a disaster planning into an area where we're thinking about our ability to be adaptive, agile, to actually look at building those capabilities, investing in those capabilities so that we can not only just survive, but also thrive. So there's a couple other comments here, just following up on what Nick said. Test your plans, not just the scenarios, but also ask what else might have happened instead of this scenario. So Nick, I am so with you on scenario planning. It is one of my favorite parts because just because you have one strategic plan moving forward doesn't mean that it's going to be the right one. So knowing the scenarios, the ways that things could come up and change, that you're going to adapt your strategy is one of the most important parts of strategic planning. So thank you for sharing that. Let's see, we have another comment from Marissa. So in their workplace, bouncing back from both moving and multiple folks retiring has been something that already was beginning pre-pandemic. As for resilience, we've hired new folks, including yourself, Marissa, who and we're reviewing old practices, filling the gaps, and developing plans for moving forward. So thank you so much for sharing that. It's one thing when you have this huge turnover with people, and it's one of the hardest things to anticipate, but also be able to plan for. We know that attrition, retirements, people moving on, the Great Resignation is a factor. There is a war for talent out there, and it's been going on for decades. We don't have enough people to fill the jobs, and so therefore, this is going to continue. Jay, I stay in good health and keep current with trends in my industry. So I love that, Jay, and I love that picture too. You stay in good health because you can't be resilient if you're run down, if you're exhausted. And that's for yourself and your organization. And I like the fact that you're staying on top of the industries too as well. I love these tips, people. This is great. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. Ricardo has a great comment here. I make sure that my team fully understands the operational management system that's in place. It allows the team to quickly adapt the way of work depending on the situation, since the system remains the same, just the performance varies since flexibility is there. Ricardo, thank you so much for explaining that. I would love to, if you can, have you share some of that operational management system, some of the high-level aspects of that. But the idea is your organization rigid? And so your processes, your management systems about managing and maintaining the status quo? Or are your systems built for change, anticipating and knowing that change is going to come? And this is something, Ricardo, I talk about all the time. I'm so glad you're reinforcing this. And that is when you have a system that provides scaffolding and it's not tied in, it's flexible and allows you to continue to build. It becomes such an important piece because you have that structure, just enough of a container for people to understand what they can and cannot do as they're going through that change and transition. And to that point, Joshua has an exact great follow-up to that. Create a safe-to-fail environment to stimulate your team to engage and share experiences, what went well, what didn't go well, and include a campaign, not just a one-off event, to test wargaming and business continuity management exercises. Again, this testing and your plans and capabilities across a range of scenarios. And then Marcella, again, just testing. Test your what-if scenarios with the team so they know how agile they can be and so they can produce alternatives. And so one of the things that I think is so important through all of this is really how do you think about all the different aspects of this? So I thought I'd share with you one of the models that one of my colleagues, Caroline Field at PA Consulting, has been working on. And this was the inspiration for this, this conversation. Let me just pull that up here. And this is resilience framework and maturity. And I really like this because what it allows us to do, let me find the best way to share it. This is as big as I can make it. The idea behind this resilience framework is that it breaks it down into 4 areas that you can think about. And one of the great ways to do this is to also test and understand your maturity levels across all of these different capability areas. I think about it as your adaptive capability. And this is just one model. There are so many models, but I thought this was helpful as one of the tools I've come across. And just having the conversations with Caroline, I want her to come on, but she's not available this week, but hopefully we can get her around to explain this in greater detail. But for example, when we think about leadership, how are you going to show up as a leader? How do you as a leadership team communicate? And are you setting up a way today to be able to have direct connection with employees so that they hear directly from you? They're not wondering what's really going on, because being able to look up to the leadership and to see this is what's going on for them to explain, this is why we feel confident that we can move through this. Because in those dark places, you want some guiding light and you look to your leaders. And so if you don't have a communication channel set up already ahead of these disruptions, your credibility as a leader, your ability to show up as a leader is going to be very diminished. So again, people who have pages set up on their intranet for leadership to show up and talk about things directly to employees, and even more importantly, externally to your community of customers, of your suppliers and partners, to explain how you're responding to changes, to disruptions, is an absolutely key thing for leadership. It's not just about having the vision, it's also how you're communicating that. So the second thing, I just want to look at people and the culture. How are we thinking about the way we're communicating with our customers, the way that we're talking to our talent, and especially how our culture is evolving? And one of the key things here is the ability to be open, to have tremendous amounts of transparency about things, and especially for your talent to create agency amongst people so that they feel like they're an owner and have accountability and responsibility to take action. Because when things are happening very, very quickly, and especially if you're a larger organization, more complex, global, matrix organization, this gets even harder because the information is harder to share. You're coordinating across many different stakeholders. And well, who's actually responsible? Who can say yes? Because anybody can say no. How do we create accountability, this culture of accountability, of shared accountability? And very importantly, how do we develop trust so that we can move faster, move at the speed of trust? So all of those good things that we think about as potentially nice to have become absolutely crucial in a disruptive situation. So investing in those things not only give you the ability to, again, create that buffer zone, but also enable the organization to pull together, to move in a different direction, to adapt and pivot, and to pivot towards those opportunities again. Quickly, I'll just go through place. This is in so many ways. Look at your IT. Look at your how well you can withstand things like cybersecurity. To what extent are you creating those risks? The scenario planning and the war game is especially helpful here. But also, just longer term, how are we building in sustainability, the environment, the climate? How is it going to impact our business? And then, of course, infrastructure. How resilient are we to be able to move back and forth between many different modalities of work? And then finally, operations. Think about the agility of your management systems. As we heard before from Nick, how resilient are they? How flexible are they to be able to adapt and change? And one of my favorite areas to look at is how are your knowledge management systems there? Are they sort of just there, but not really great? Are you able to connect all the information? Especially as you're innovating, as you're changing and you're moving so fast. Is information available? Are people being open about sharing the information? And is it organized in a way that anybody can access it? Because it's one thing to have a knowledge management place, but are people actually using it, putting information into it, and also pulling it out and making good use of that? So how good are you at this? If you were to do a quick assessment, even without all the questions behind it, just across these 12 areas, how well are you doing? And that assessment, I think, is a really important thing. I'll come back in a second and talk about the challenges, but I'm seeing all of these comments piling up, so I want to make sure we address some of that. Let's see, Ricardo has this comment. Let me go back and open this up. So Ricardo has this comment. For example, one element of the system is related to developing people skills. Thank you for this example. It allows people to cover skills even from other roles so they can take on responsibilities when needed. Based on this radar, you could go to the people part. You can use a skills matrix and even link it to the incentives when people is developing more skills. And so this is I think a great example of that is when I was on the U.S. Aircraft carrier, the USS Nimitz. I did this back in, I think it was 2009 now, quite a few years ago. But it was interesting to me that the executive officers, especially the airplane pilots, the fighter pilots, would go up in the air and fight, but they also had responsibilities for managing a department. So everybody was trained to do their primary job, but also a backup job, so that when the chaos of things, if there are gaps, people can step in and fill in for that second job. Again, building in redundancies, building in resilience. So thank you for that example. Jay has a point here that agency is very important, but it does challenge these ossified hierarchies. And hierarchies, again, existed in the past because communications were so hard and directions had to come from the top. But when you have agency at the front lines, people can make decisions without having to check up. And it truly does challenge hierarchies. So instead of doing that in a moment of crisis, doing that today, now when you have the capacity, have the abundance to deal with these really difficult cultural issues is really important. Let's see, we have Lynn here saying, aligned motivations is vital to trust, accountability and resilience. Rallying around what's best for customers is often a unifying factor. Resilience enables organizational agility, nimbleness to meet evolving marketplace opportunities for fastest growth. I couldn't agree more, Lynn, because when it comes to accountability, resilience, and trust, they are all parts of the same group. I have Caroline shared with me this wonderful Venn diagram about how they overlap with each other. And this all comes back to agility, adaptability, the ability for an organization to pivot, and especially for the people inside the organization to pivot too as well. Jay asked, is it possible to share my resilience framework slide? I will absolutely share this. I typically will write up this as a post inside of my LinkedIn newsletter. So I will definitely have this resilience framework inside of that. I'll do my best to try to figure out some other way to be able to share that. But wait 2 days, Thursday, it'll be up there and you'll be able to see it there then. All right, those are the comments for now. Fantastic comments from everyone. I want to go into the last part here very quickly and talk about some of the challenges that I see us having. And in particular, one of the biggest challenges I see is just plain old planning, just even finding the time to go and do this. Because we're so busy just dealing with all the fires that we have in front of us on a daily operational basis. How on earth are we going to have to find time to think about the future and do all this planning? Well, I think it's really important to look at and set aside time, because if you look at the opportunity costs or actually the risk assessments that you see, there's so much risk for not doing this planning. So just the simple justification to say, this is just business continuity at the most basic level. But where you're at it, I think it's really important to also put in all of the scenarios, do all the testing behind it. Scenario planning is one of the lost art forms of strategic planning, I believe, because we put so much time and effort into crafting the perfect strategy. I would take half of that effort away and actually invest it in scenario planning so that you can build a robust, resilient strategy. And then set up the markers and the signals to say, how do we know that our assumptions are coming true or not as we go through the strategy? We assume that there's going to be so much inflation. We assume that there's going to be so much growth, so much attrition. But what if those things start changing? What are our backup plans, our scenarios, and how do we run them? So the planning, scenario planning, but also the testing. Are we actually as capable as we thought we were? Doing the assessments with that framework or whichever framework you want to use. But go and test. And the whole goal here is to increase your confidence that you are able to weather any storm and, more importantly, take advantage of any opportunities that come your way. So planning is the first challenge, just finding the time and, frankly, the expertise to be able to do that. The second thing is the investment. Once you have this plan, once you've done the gap analysis, you go, well, we're not ready here. What are we going to do? We're going to have to make some investment. And justifying that investment of time, money, people, resources is really difficult because there's so many other priorities. And I think of business as always just making all of these less than optimal trade-offs between competing priorities. So the investment, I think, really needs to be focused not on just business continuity, but also what are the opportunity costs if we are not able to adapt and to take advantage of that small little window when new opportunities come our way. We need to be resilient and adaptable and agile to not only just, again, adapt to the bad things, but to be able to push away, go through that cloud of uncertainty and see the little golden nuggets of opportunities that are there too. And I think the third challenge is focusing on this upside. I can't tell you how many meetings I've been in where we're planning for downside things, especially right now as we see on the horizon potential recession and downturns. How are we planning for that? And a lot of the planning consists of like, are we going to hang on to our people? Are we making a commitment to the principles around reducing our EBITDA, reducing our profit in order to retain people? And we have those principles written out. But do we also have the other side of looking and saying, what are the opportunities that we anticipate? What are the needs that are going to emerge from our customers or our clients? And investing in those products and those services today, anticipating they're going to come in the future. That's a very different way of planning for the downturn, so to speak. And I had personal experience for this. I started my company, my previous company, Altimeter, in 2008, right before the recession hit. And as it was developing, one of the things that we really looked at, I was saying, well, what are the services and the knowledge that people need to have moving into this recession as budgets are being cut and this new emerging technology of social technologies and digital collaboration was rising? How can we use that to replace some of the budgets that have been cut, especially on marketing, customer service, and sales outreach? And it was just a blue ocean out there because no one else was talking about it. What were the opportunities to be able to be helpful and to be of service during this downtime, because the needs are still there. They're just different. So this is how I really encourage you to think about overcoming these challenges of planning, investment, and then focusing on the upside. Where are the opportunities as disruptions are coming your way? Not just thinking about the hardening and the business survival and continuity aspects of resilience planning. All right, so let's see. I have a couple last comments here, and then we're going to close out. So Joshua has a comment about that diagram. This diagram is a good example of creating a standardized approach to resilience and crisis management. If you provide templates and information to your staff and they know how to use it, then it can help them in a moment of crisis. Too often companies do not have this baseline and staff do not know how to respond. And they try to avoid vesting all of your resilience in a small number of experts, bring staff into the process ahead of the crisis point. Joshua, this is a keeper. So thank you so much for sharing this, because you want that openness and transparency so that you're not, again, some people don't, some organizations, and I've talked to some leaders, like, I don't want to tell people about the bad news. I don't want to have them feel like we're going to be going through a bad spot, because they may get scared. They may stop doing their jobs. I think we have to have more confidence in our people that they're resilient. They understand that things go wrong and that everything isn't going to be perfect. And if you give them this container, that's what these frameworks are like. They're containers that give you some certainty to be able to work through the uncertainty. It makes a huge difference. So thank you so much for sharing that, Joshua. Nick has a comment here. Often the same people in organizations are in charge of firefighting and planning for future issues. I absolutely agree that, again, I think what you're commenting here is that the same people who are in charge of the firefighting and planning for the future. And you may find, Nick, that, again, I think to your point, those are two completely different opportunities. And so I've seen some organizations do this really well. They have one team thinking about survival and all those, but another team that's working alongside them, looking at the opportunities, because it's really hard to shift your mindset from one place to the other. And Joshua has another comment here. Confidence works across the team, the company, and also for your partners and investors. That's such a great comment, because it's an ecosystem that you're creating here. And the more you can create that confidence, that have that baseline and that framework to be able to increase the confidence of everyone in the ecosystem, it really helps tremendously in making sure that everyone is on the same page. We may not know exactly where we're heading, but we have a direction. We have principles that are going to guide us. We have confidence that we're going to survive because our continuity plans are in place. And I keep saying that confidence isn't knowing that we're going to be right. It's not knowing that we're going to get things perfectly well done. It may not even mean that we succeed. Confidence is that we're going to be okay. And therefore, because we have that baseline that we're going to be okay, it allows us to move into these uncertain times, to take on these risks and feel and have the fact that we can take these actions and decisions, take on the risk and know that we're going to be okay. So that's what I have for today. I am taking next week off I am going on vacation. I'm actually going to Disneyland and taking my kids, my adult kids there for a birthday. So I'll be skipping next week. And so I'll be back on Tuesday, May 3rd, usual time, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. East Coast time. And we're going to be discussing how to build great teams, especially by leaning into strengths. I have been a huge fan of ideas of like strength builders, strength finders, and ran my entire company on that. And recently just did the same exercise with my new executive team. And so I thought it would be a good time to revisit strengths and how we can look at the strengths cohesively as an organization and really use it as a foundation for your company culture, but also for your strategy. So we'll be looking at that in 2 weeks' time. Again, I wish you all the best in thinking about resilience. Clearly from the comments today, there was a lot of interest, a lot of best practices out there. I hope we can continue this dialogue. Please send me your ideas, your best practices. I would love to hear about them, see them. That's how I do this research. Thank you, and I'll talk to you in 2 weeks. Take care.